All right, everyone, so we're back at Venetian playing the PLO mix, and just a reminder, if I get 4 cards, I'm playing PLO, and if I get 5, I'm playing Big O. This time we're playing a 5-5, which is a 300 min to a 2K max, so let's get into it. We go card dead initially for about an hour or so, and I look down at the Ace-Jack 6-5 deuce, single suit in the cutoff. There's 1 limp, I make a 20, and there are 4 callers, so we're going 5 ways to a flop. Flop comes down 7-6-5 with 2 clubs, checks to me, I bet 100, and there are 2 callers, so we're going 3 ways to a turn. The turn brings a 3 of spades, checks to me once again, and only one decision to make. I put everything in the middle. Over to Josh, who makes the call. Then the late position player is named Anthony from the Bay Area. Pretty cool guy. He was in town for the weekend. He goes ahead and pots it, so it gives me a little protection here, and he does get Josh to fold. So we're going heads up to the river. My opponent turns over the Ace-10-9-8-3, so he has the nut straight. And we're drawing a 4 outs for a scoop, so I'm thinking of a card, and the dealer puts out the 6 of diamonds on the river, and we get a nice pot here in the early going. Shortly after the previous hand, I look down at the Queen Jack 9-8 single suited on the button. We go to flops of 10-8-7 with 2 diamonds and 9-6-4 rainbow. Checks to Anthony, who's the same opponent from the previous hand. He bets 55. I make the call, and there are 2 callers behind, so we're going 4 ways to a couple turns. The turn to bring a queen of clubs on the top and 4 diamonds on the bottom. The small blind puts everything in the middle for 245. Folds over to Anthony, who makes the call. And at this point, I want to protect my hand. I do have the nuts still on the top, not much on the bottom, but obviously there's diamonds now on both boards. So don't want to really give Anthony a cheap look at it. So I put everything in the middle as well, just to charge the maximum for any potential draws he has. And he doesn't look too happy about it and flings in his cards to the muck. So we're going heads up to a couple rivers. The river's bringing 8 of clubs on the top and 7 hearts on the bottom. And I turn over my hand. My opponent turns over his. He has the Ace-Ace-Jack 7. So we're good on the top, and his aces up are good on the bottom for a chop. I go card dead for a while. This hand is over an hour and a half after the previous one when I look down at the Ace-Queen 5-4 deuce, single suit in the small blind. Now, just to give some context, there's 130 sitting on the button, which of course I'm eligible to win. So when there's 5 limps, I make it 30, and there are 6 callers, so we're going 7 ways to a flop. The flop comes down 9-8-4 with 2 hearts, and obviously with the 1-1 SPR, only 1 move to make. I put everything in the middle. There are 2 shoves behind, and then there are 2 callers behind as well. So didn't get anyone fold here, and we're going 5 ways to a turn. The turn brings a jack of clubs. The 2 players on the side end up going all in, so no more action. We're obviously going to need some help here, and we're still going 5 ways to a river. The river brings an ace of hearts, now gives us the second nut low as well as 2 pair, but of course brings in the front door flush. Don ends up turning over the King 9-9-7, so he ends up winning the high portion of the side pot. I get the low. But then Matt turns over the King Jack 10-3 deuce, so he rivered nut. Even though we don't get any of the main pot, and of course don't get the small blind jackpot because we didn't scoop, we actually end up doubling up by chopping the side pot. Shortly after the previous hand, I look down at the Ace-Jack 5 deuce, single suited in the big blind. We go to flops of 4 deuce deuce with 2 spades and Jack 9-4 rainbow. When it checks to me, I bet the full pot of 80, and there are 2 callers, so we're going 3 ways to a couple turns. The turn to bring a queen of clubs on the top and an 8 of spades on the bottom. Your main goal in these double board bomb pots is to try to scoop the hand. Now, if somebody called with the most obvious draw of Queen 10, they made their straight on the bottom, and I can no longer win that board. If you determine that you can no longer scoop the hand, you really have one of 2 options. Your first of which is to try to bet and put a lot of pressure on your opponents to fold a better hand. Or 2, you can play a little bit more defensive and usually go into check call mode. If you're going to go with this route, you really prefer to be multi-way, as it doesn't make too much sense to go heads up and just check call, basically hoping to chop up the antes. So with all that being said, I end up checks over to Josh in late position, who bets the full pot. I think a bit and get out of the way. The other opponent makes the call. They end up going heads up, 2 rivers of King of Spades on the top and 8 of diamonds on the bottom. It goes bet and call. Josh ends up turning over the Queen 10, and the other opponent ends up turning over the Deuce Queen for the full house. So they chop it up here. If you want to try out this awesome mix here at the Venetian, our next meetup game is going to be Friday, October 18th. That's from 2 to 10. It's a $300 min, 2K max buy-in. And I'll put my number here on the screen. I can add you to the WhatsApp group chat as well as get you on the list. Hope to see you guys all out there, and let's get back to the video. About 15 minutes after the previous hand, I look down at King King 4-3 single suited under the gun. We go to flops of King 7-3 with 2 hearts and Jack Jack 7 rainbow. Action checks the mat in the big blind, who bets 80. I make the call, folds over to Jonathan, who then pots it to 400. Matt makes the call, and I would really prefer to have some hearts in my hand, as I'm probably getting free rolled here, with one of them having a jack with hearts. But with my stack size, as I mentioned previously, if you are most likely playing a hand that can only win one board, you want to definitely be multi-way. So that meets the requirements here. So I put everything in the middle, and they both make the call. So we're going 3 ways to a couple turns. The turn to bring a queen of diamonds on top, queen of spades on the bottom. They end up getting the rest of their money in. We go to rivers, which brings a 5 of spades on top, deuce of clubs on the bottom. Matt ends up showing the ace jack 7-5. Then Jonathan turns over his hand. He has the jack 8-7 deuce. So they have the same full house there on the bottom, and I'm going to win the top board with my set of kings. Shortly after the previous hand, I look down at King Queen 9-4 single suit in the small blind. This is a 6-way limped pot. We go to a flop of ace 9-5 all clubs. There's $100 sitting on top of the button, which of course I'm eligible to win. So if that wasn't the case, I probably wouldn't have played it this way. But being that there is the $100 there, I'm not going to obviously get any credit by leading out. So I just lead out for the full pot of 30, and Jonathan makes the call. So we're going heads up to a turn. The turn brings a 6, so I just continue telling the story and bet the full pot of 90, and he quickly makes the call. So still going heads up to a river. The river brings another 6, this time the 6 of diamonds, and I check this time. Jonathan thinks a bit and bets 150. And, he obviously is most likely calling me with a set there on the flop, but it's also possible that he could have been calling with a lower flush, just not giving me credit again, as I am the small blind with the $100 incentive here to win this pot. So I end up tossing in the chips for a call, and Jonathan turns over the Queen Jack 5-5. So he did fill up, and he's going to take this one down. The very next hand, I look down at the King 10 9-8 double suited on the button. There's a middle position limp, folds to me. I make it 25, over to the small blind, who then makes it 85. Over to the limper, who limp re-raises for 265. And it was probably a combination of being slightly tilted, but also, he is representing aces here, which the king I'd prefer to be a little bit of a lower card to not have proximity to his most likely aces. But King 10 9-8 double suited is a pretty decent candidate to take down aces. So I just put everything in the middle. The small blind player folds, and the middle position player makes the call. So we're going heads up to a run out. The flop comes out pretty good for us in 10-9-9 with 2 diamonds. The turn brings a queen of hearts. River brings the 4 of diamonds. I turn over my hand. My opponent turns over his. He has the ace 10-6. So he did have aces and actually made the nut flush on the river, but we're going to take it down with the flopped full house. 45 minutes after the previous hand, now about 6 hours into the session, I look down at the ace queen 6-4 single suited middle position. We go to flops of queen 5-4 with 2 clubs and queen 10-7 rainbow. Checks to Josh in early position, who bets 70. I make the call, and there's another caller behind, so we're going 3 ways to a couple turns. The turn to bring a jack of hearts on the top and king of clubs on the bottom. Josh continues betting, this time the full pot of 280. And over to me, I definitely can't fold the nut flush draw on both boards. So in either deciding to call or shove, I thought shoving was slightly better, as I can potentially get the other player to fold maybe a hand that would potentially end up beating me on one board. So it gives me, a little bit more opportunity to not get scooped by one player. So that's what I do. The other player thinks a bit and does fold, and Josh gets a count and makes the call. So we're going heads up to a couple rivers. The rivers bring a deuce of spades on the top and 5 of hearts on the bottom. So 2 complete bricks, which is obviously not great for me. Josh ends up turning over the Queen Jack 7-3. So he has 2 pair on both boards, and he is going to scoop this one. About 2 hours after the previous hand, now about 8 hours into the session, I look down at the ace 9-4 single suited middle position. I limp. There's a raise to 20. There are 2 callers. Small blind makes it 115. Josh makes the call. I then shove over the top. Lay position calls all in for less. Small blind has a little bit more. He makes the call. And Josh thinks a bit and knows I have aces, but makes the call anyway. So we're going 4 ways, all in to a run out. The flop comes out 10-6-3 with 2 diamonds. Turn brings a 6 of clubs, now giving us the backdoor nut flush draw. River brings a jack of hearts. So not the best run out, but not the worst. I turn over my hand. Josh ends up turning over his. He has the queen, queen, 10, 5. And we get a little revenge here on our buddy Josh. Shortly after the previous hand, I looked down at the Jack 10 5 deuce, single suit in the cutoff. And as you can probably see on the screen, there's $80 in front of me. That's an $80 live straddle. That's another really cool feature about our game is there are unlimited live straddles. The button makes it 200 and there are 4 callers over to me. Really not a great hand, of course, but only having to call 120 more. I put the chips in and we're going 6 ways to a flop. The flop comes out Jack 8-5 with 2 spades. Checks over to Josh, who bets the full pot. Folds over to me, and with about a 1-to-1 SPR, what do you guys do in this situation? Do you go ahead and just shrug, call it, just saying, hey, there's too much in the pot? Or do you think about what he could be doing this with? That's what I did. I kind of thought, really, what hand could he be doing this with that I'm a favorite against? And I didn't think of too many. The only one is possibly 8-5 with no other additional equity to go along with it. And the fact that I don't have any spades makes it very likely that Josh has spades here. So I ended up folding and trying to pick a better spot, and the other players ended up folding as well. And Josh ended up turning over the 9-9-7-3 with 3 spades. So I ended up running the numbers, and he was actually a 52% equity favorite. But I think all that being considered, I believe with the SPR being what it was, I probably had to make the call, but live to fight another day. About 30 minutes after the previous hand, I looked down at the A7-5-5-3 double suited in the small blind. There's 1 limp. Next player makes it 25. 1 caller, I call, and there are a couple calls behind. So we're going 5 ways to a flop. Flop comes out Queen 5-4 rainbow. I checks over to Josh in late position, who bets 20. I make it 150. Eric from Chicago in the big blind makes the call, and Josh makes the fold. So we're going heads up to a turn. The turn brings another 4. And in the moment, I kind of thought that by raising on the flop, it's going to look like I have maybe ace deuce 3, 6 deuce 3, some kind of like low wrap with a straight. So I shouldn't like the 4 in a lot of cases. So that was my thinking when I checked. Maybe get him, induce him to bet with a queen or something along those lines. But unfortunately, he checks back. So still going heads up to a river. The river brings another 4 and can't slow play anymore, obviously. This time I bet 265, and Eric doesn't waste too much time before folding. So don't get any more value, but we take down the pot as well as the small blind jackpot. Next interesting hand, I look down at the Jack 9-8-6 double suited in the big blind. We go to flops of 10-8-8 rainbow and ace king 5 with 2 spades. When action checks to me, I bet 30, and only Chris in late position makes the call. So we're going heads up to a couple turns. The turns bring the 9 of diamonds on top, 3 of clubs on the bottom. This time I bet 100, and Chris quickly calls. So we're still going heads up to a couple rivers. The rivers bring the ace of clubs on top and 8 of hearts on the bottom. So we improve to a pair of 8s, but I don't believe that's going to be best on that board. So I size up to 250 to try to get him off that bottom board. And instead of him either folding or calling, he decides to put in the raise. He makes it 1,000 total. And pretty gross spot. Of course, I have the boat on the top, but again, just a pair of 8s on the bottom. So really not going to most likely be good on that board. So I end up folding. Chris ends up turning over pocket aces. So he had the set on the bottom and hits the 1 outer on the top, and he's going to take this one down. Shortly after the previous hand, I looked down at the ace king king 6 deuce single suited on the button, and this time the $40 straddle's on. Folds to me. I make the call. 2 other callers over to Josh, who's the straddler. He makes it 200, and he's not really going to typically have a very strong hand here. So I just decide to back shove, put everything in the middle. Folds over to Josh, who ends up tanking for over a minute before eventually folding. So we take down a pretty decent sized pot here. I go card dead for a while. This hand is over an hour after the previous one. When I look down at the ace-ace-3-3 single suited in the big blind in a straddle pot, there is 1 limp. Next player makes it 50. There are 2 callers over to me. I then make it 260, and there's 1 caller and then another caller for less. So we're going 3 ways to a flop. The flop comes down queen 8 deuce with 2 hearts. So not really a great flop, but with the SPR as low as it is, I don't really have a choice. I just have to go with it. So I put everything in the middle. My opponent quickly makes the call. So we're going 3 ways to a run out. The turn brings the 10 of hearts. River brings another deuce. So don't really beat much here. I turn over my hand and my opponent turns over his. He has the king, king, jack, 6. So he hit the flush and he's going to take this one down. What's up, guys? Wayne back here with you. So today I was in for 1250, out for 0. So despite not cashing out a single chip, definitely had a lot of fun. The 5-5 just ran a lot smoother, as we've mentioned in previous videos. So hope to see you guys out at the meetup game. If not in October, we're also going to be there December 6th. That's also from 2 to 10. And really, we're going to be there for the first 2 or 3 weeks of December. So a lot of you are going to probably be in town with the WPT and a bunch of other tournaments. So looking forward to seeing you guys out there. And of course, if you have any questions, let me know. And if you haven't seen the previous episode, I'll go ahead and link it up here. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.